When we talk about avoidant attachment, what we're really talking about a profound, often invisible fear, a fear that keeps people at a distance from the very thing they secretly crave: connection. Avoidant individuals are not cold or unloving. They are, in fact, highly sensitive to intimacy in ways that most of us might not fully grasp. Their inner world is structured around self, reliance, and control, a protective fortress built not out of selfishness, but out of survival. Over time, this mechanism becomes habitual. It's as if closeness itself carries a whisper of danger, and their response is to step back, to pull away, sometimes even from those who care most deeply. Understanding this is crucial because it reframes our perception of avoidance. When they resist love, when they retreat at the moment of connection, it's rarely about you. It's about a pattern formed in early life, often rooted in inconsistent care or subtle emotional neglect. They learned, consciously or unconsciously, that dependence on others is risky. And so, they carry a paradox, an undeniable desire for intimacy, paired with an instinctive drive to protect themselves from it. That tension shapes almost everything in their relationships. The way they communicate, the way they respond to affection, and even the way they interpret the simplest gestures of care. The fascinating thing about avoidance is how much they notice, yet how little they reveal. They are experts at reading emotions, at sensing moods, at understanding nuances. But revealing their own vulnerability feels like stepping onto thin ice. Every attempt to draw them out, to press them closer, risks triggering a defensive retreat. And so, the deeper you try to pull, the further they may pull away. It's not a rejection of you, it's a survival strategy, an unconscious method of self-preservation. This is why conventional expressions of love, as beautiful as they are, often miss the mark. Words like, "I love you," or grand romantic gestures can feel overwhelming, almost suffocating, because they imply a closeness that the avoidant isn't ready to accept. Love for them isn't a bridge. It can feel like a rope that might strangle. So the question becomes, how do we reach someone who has built walls not out of disdain, but out of caution? How do we touch someone's emotional core without triggering that instinct to flee? The answer lies not in forcing intimacy, but in understanding it. Avoidants respond to acknowledgement, to a recognition of their inner world without judgment, without pressure. They need to feel seen, not changed, heard, not corrected, understood, not pursued. And here is where the power of words, carefully chosen and sincerely delivered, begins to reveal itself. Because while actions speak words, when used thoughtfully, can penetrate defenses that deeds cannot. They offer a way to connect without suffocating, to invite closeness without forcing it, to validate without overwhelming. So when we think about avoidant attachment, the key insight is this: they are not unreachable, they are guarded. They are not indifferent, they are cautious. And the greatest gift we can offer is not the intensity of love itself, but the patient, respectful recognition of the complex, nuanced human being beneath the avoidance. Understanding this is the first step toward touching them in ways deeper than love, in ways that linger and transform. Because at the end of the day, connection is not about breaking walls. It's about offering a hand that doesn't push, a voice that doesn't demand, a presence that simply acknowledges, "I see you." And sometimes, that is more powerful than love itself. We often underestimate the power of words. We think that actions, those visible demonstrations of care, are what truly move people. And in many cases, they do. But when it comes to someone with avoidant attachment, the impact of action is limited unless it is paired with the right words. Avoidants live in a world where intimacy is both desired and feared, and this duality creates a peculiar dynamic. Gestures, even generous ones, can be misread as pressure. A surprise visit, a grand declaration of love, even the gentlest touch, can trigger that old reflex, the need to retreat. Actions alone, no matter how sincere, may fall flat, or worse, reinforce the very barriers they are meant to dissolve. Words, on the other hand, have a precision that gestures rarely achieve. They can carry understanding, validation, and empathy in ways that action cannot. But they must be chosen carefully, spoken with intention, and delivered with timing and nuance. A well-timed phrase can bypass resistance, slip through the defenses, and reach the part of the avoidant that yearns to be seen and acknowledged. Words can offer a sense of safety without imposing closeness. They can say, "I recognize your inner struggle," without demanding that the other person surrender it. They can open doors without forcing the door open. This is where many of us get it wrong. We assume that saying, "I love you," is the ultimate connector. But for someone with avoidant attachment, love can feel like a tidal wave, overwhelming, demanding, and difficult to navigate. They aren't rejecting the sentiment. They are protecting themselves from the intensity. So how do you communicate in a way that actually touches them? The answer is subtle, yet profound. You speak in terms of understanding and acknowledgement rather than expectation. You offer recognition without pressure. You convey presence without intrusion. In essence, you validate the experience of being them without trying to fix it. Psychologically, this works because the avoidant mind is always assessing risk. Every interaction is filtered through a lens of self-preservation. When words acknowledge their feelings without judgment or demand, that lens relaxes slightly. The brain interprets this as a space that is safe to inhabit, a place where vulnerability can exist without immediate consequence. Over time, repeated experiences of this kind create a foundation of trust, not the kind that is dramatic or declarative, but the kind that is quiet, consistent, and profoundly intimate. Philosophically, there is a deeper truth here. Human connection is less about grand gestures and more about accurate perception. We often think that to love is to act, to give. But love, at its most profound level, is also a language of recognition, of empathy. For someone who fears closeness, words are the bridge. They are the gentle acknowledgement that says, "I see you exactly as you are, and I will not ask you to change for me." That is more powerful than any bouquet, any gift, any dramatic display of affection. So the challenge is not just to communicate, but to communicate wisely. It is to resist the instinct to impress, to overwhelm, or to force connection, and instead to embrace the subtle art of saying exactly what needs to be heard, without excess, without anxiety, without hidden motives. This is the difference between a connection that scares someone away and one that draws them in. At the end of the day, words can do what gestures cannot. They can touch the soul without threatening it. They can reach past walls, past defenses, and past fear, straight into the quiet place where understanding lives. And that is where real intimacy begins, not with love alone, but with the recognition that before someone can accept your love, they must first feel fully seen. Now we arrive at the heart of the matter, the three words that touch an avoidant deeper than love. I won't keep you guessing, because their power lies not in mystery but in clarity. These words are simple, almost unremarkable in ordinary conversation, yet for someone with avoidant attachment, they carry the weight of profound recognition. I understand you. 3 words. That's all. Yet in those 3 words lies a depth that love alone cannot reach. Why these words? Because avoidants live in a world of unspoken judgments, real or imagined, about their desire for distance. They are constantly aware that their very nature, the way they protect themselves, can be misinterpreted as coldness or rejection. And that awareness creates tension, a subtle anxiety that undercuts closeness even when it is wanted. When someone looks at them and says, "I understand you," it does something remarkable. It lifts a layer of that tension. It validates their inner experience not as a problem to be solved, but as a truth to be acknowledged. It whispers that it's okay to be who they are, even if they are not fully open yet. Psychologically, these words signal safety in a way that love cannot. Love, in its conventional form, is often performative. It implies expectations, obligations, a roadmap toward intimacy that an avoidant may not be ready to follow. Understanding, however, carries no demands. It says, in effect, "I see the patterns of your heart. I see your fear, your caution, your need for space, and I honor it." In that moment, walls do not need to fall. They can simply soften. And in that softness, trust begins to take root. Philosophically, there is a subtle beauty here. Connection is not coercion. Intimacy is not insistence. Real emotional impact comes not from what we do for others, but from the way we recognize them. "I understand you" does not ask an avoidant to change. It does not push them toward a closeness they may instinctively resist. Instead, it mirrors their experience back to them, offering acknowledgement and empathy. That reflection is powerful because it creates resonance. Deep down, everyone longs to be seen accurately. For the avoidant, whose life has often been about hiding, managing, and controlling perception, this recognition is more profound than any declaration of love. It's important to note that these words are not magic in the sense of instantly transforming a relationship. They are the opening, not the culmination. They are a gesture of respect for inner life, a way of saying, without intrusion or pressure, I am here and I see you. Repeated over time, in moments of genuine connection, they create a rhythm of trust. The avoidant begins to associate closeness with safety, not threat. The heart begins to notice that vulnerability need not be punished, that being seen does not equal being trapped. And that is the foundation on which real intimacy can grow. There is also a subtle humility embedded in these words. They remind us that our role in connection is not to fix or rescue, but to witness and accept. To say, I understand you, is to place yourself beside another, not in front of them. It acknowledges limits, respects autonomy, and opens space for voluntary closeness. And in that space, something remarkable happens. The avoidant no longer feels compelled to hide or escape. They can simply be. So, when we talk about touching an avoidant deeper than love, remember this: it is not about passion, not about grand gestures, not about declarations. It is about empathy. It is about recognition. It is about saying in the simplest and most profound way possible, I understand you. These three words carry a power that love alone often cannot match because they honor what is most human, the desire to be seen and accepted for exactly who we are. And here is the takeaway. Connection begins not with changing someone's heart, but with acknowledging the truth of it. Speak these words with sincerity, with patience, and with respect, and you will plant the seeds of trust that no grand romantic gesture ever could. Understanding what to say is only half the equation. Timing and delivery are just as critical, perhaps even more so, when it comes to reaching someone with avoidant attachment. You can have the perfect words, the ones that touch deeper than love itself, and still miss the mark if they are delivered in the wrong moment or with the wrong energy. Avoidants are constantly scanning for risk, assessing the emotional climate before they allow themselves to lean in. A single misstep, a tone that feels demanding, a timing that feels rushed, or even a context that feels threatening can nullify all your efforts. The challenge, then, is to cultivate sensitivity, awareness, and patience. Timing is not about waiting for the perfect moment, which rarely exists. It's about being attuned to the subtle signals, the micro indicators that suggest openness rather than resistance. It's noticing when their guard has relaxed, when their words hint at vulnerability, when their eyes convey a willingness to be seen. These are the moments when your words can land, not like a hammer, but like a gentle key sliding into a lock. Delivery too matters. Avoidants are hyper-aware of energy, intention, and subtext. They can sense pressure, even when it is unintentional, and react to it as if their autonomy were under threat. That's why sincerity is non-negotiable. Words spoken with hesitation, with hidden agendas, or with a subtle push for reciprocation are experienced as intrusion. But words spoken with calm presence, steady attention, and clear acknowledgement carry a magnetic force. They communicate, I am here, I am not rushing you, and I respect the space you need. In that space, walls soften and trust begins to grow organically. There's a psychological principle at play here that is important to understand. Avoidance defensive mechanisms are essentially adaptive. They are finely tuned for survival in relational contexts where closeness has historically felt risky. By controlling the pace and energy of interaction, you reduce perceived threat and allow the avoidant brain to relax. This is not manipulation. It is alignment with the natural rhythm of human attachment. It is respect for the internal logic of another person's emotional architecture. Philosophically, this speaks to a larger truth about human connection. We often think that persistence or intensity will overcome distance. We assume that more effort, louder declarations, or repeated persuasion will break through. But connection is not coercion. True intimacy requires attunement, sensitivity, and a kind of disciplined patience. It's about entering the relational space with awareness, adjusting to subtle cues, and letting timing and tone carry the words where they are most needed. In essence, you are creating conditions in which understanding, not pressure, can flourish. The consequences of ignoring timing and delivery are subtle but profound. A rushed statement of empathy can trigger retreat. A poorly attuned tone can reinforce avoidance rather than dissolve it. But when you speak with intention, observing both what is said and how it is experienced, the effect is cumulative. Repeated, delivered acknowledgement builds a pattern of safety. Over time, the avoidant begins to associate your presence with calm, not threat with understanding, not judgment with choice, not coercion. And in that safe context, the deepest walls can slowly, naturally soften. So, the lesson here is simple but powerful. The right words are only as effective as the way and the moment in which they are spoken. Understanding, patience, and attunement are not secondary. They are the medium through which the message itself travels. Without them, even the most insightful, empathetic words may be lost. With them, 3 simple words, I understand you, become transformative. And here is what I want you to take away. Connection is not a race, it is a dance. Your steps, your rhythm, and the space you leave for the other person determine whether intimacy emerges or retreats. Timing and delivery are not tricks. They are expressions of respect, empathy, and insight. Speak with awareness, and the doors to deeper understanding will open naturally, quietly, and powerfully. Understanding and timing alone, though essential, are only part of the equation. The real question is what happens when these principles are applied consistently. How does careful acknowledgement, chosen words, and patient timing translate into a connection that is genuine, lasting, and transformative? This is where the power of real relationship building emerges. Because for someone with avoidant attachment, intimacy is not about declarations or passion. It's about trust, safety, and the quiet assurance that being seen does not come with danger. When you speak to an avoidant in a way that respects their boundaries, validates their inner world, and meets them without expectation, something remarkable occurs. Walls start to soften, not because they are forced down, but because the environment encourages it. Repetition is key here. Not repetition of words without feeling, but repetition of genuine presence. Each instance of understanding reinforces the sense that closeness does not require surrender or loss of autonomy. Over time, this builds a pattern that rewrites the avoidant's internal narrative. Intimacy is no longer a threat, it is a space they can inhabit safely. Psychologically, this taps into one of the deepest truths of human behavior. Our brains respond to patterns, to predictability, to consistent experiences of safety. Avoidants are wired to detect inconsistency, subtle pressure, or coercion, and when those cues appear, they retreat. But when someone consistently meets them with calm, acknowledgement, and empathy, the brain begins to reclassify closeness from danger to safety. This is why, paradoxically, connection with an avoidant is less about effortful persuasion and more about steady, patient alignment with their emotional reality. Understanding them is not a one-time act. It is a practice, a rhythm that demonstrates reliability and respect over time. Philosophically, there's a profound lesson here about the nature of human connection. We often think that relationships are built through intensity, through drama, through visible declarations of care. But the deepest, most resilient bonds are often quiet and understated. They grow in the space between words and actions, in the pauses where understanding is felt rather than proclaimed. For the avoidant, connection blossoms not when they are pressured to open up, but when they are given the chance to explore intimacy on their own terms, knowing that their truth will be honored. This approach has ripple effects beyond the avoidant themselves. When we practice patience, attunement, and acknowledgement, we are not merely influencing one person's behavior. We are cultivating our own capacity for empathy and emotional intelligence. We are learning to observe without judgment, to listen without agenda, and to create relational spaces that encourage authenticity rather than compliance. In other words, the process transforms both sides of the connection, elevating the quality of human interaction in a way that is rare and deeply fulfilling. The beauty of this is that real connection does not require perfection. It requires sincerity, consistency, and a willingness to meet another human being where they are. It is in the small moments of recognition, in the gentle affirmations of understanding, in the patience to allow closeness to grow organically, that trust and intimacy take root. For an avoidant, these are not minor niceties. They are lifelines, pathways to connection that respect both their desire for independence and their hidden yearning for closeness. So, when we speak of building real connection, it is not about what we say in a single moment. It is about the cumulative effect of our presence, our words, and our understanding over time. It is about creating a relational environment in which the avoidant feels safe enough to explore intimacy without fear, confident that their inner world will be honored. And that, ultimately, is the difference between fleeting affection and transformative connection. Here is the takeaway: true intimacy is not about convincing someone to love you or forcing closeness that they are not ready for. It is about creating trust, fostering safety, and demonstrating through consistent, patient, and sincere actions that being seen does not mean being controlled. That is the foundation upon which real connection and meaningful, lasting relationships are built. Ultimately, what all of this points to is the transformative power of empathy. Understanding the avoidant mind, choosing your words carefully, observing timing and delivery, and consistently building trust are all steps toward a broader principle. The principle that connection is a matter of genuine human understanding, not control or persuasion. When we approach others with empathy, when we truly see them, respect their boundaries, and acknowledge their inner experience, we are not only bridging the gaps in their emotional defenses, we are also transforming ourselves. Empathy is deceptively simple. We often think it is about feeling someone else's pain or joy or stepping into their shoes for a moment. But in reality, empathy is more radical than that. It is the discipline of recognizing another person's reality as fully valid, even when it challenges our assumptions, desires, or expectations. It is about creating space for someone to be exactly who they are, without trying to fit them into our narrative or our timeline. For the avoidant, who has often lived in a world where their feelings were misunderstood, minimized, or misjudged, this kind of empathy is more than comforting. It is liberating. Think about what that means in practice. To transform a relationship with an avoidant, we must commit to understanding them not superficially, but deeply. We must listen without agenda, observe without judgment, and validate without attempting to fix. That is the essence of relational empathy. It is not passive. It requires attention, patience, and courage. It requires that we resist the temptation to fill silence with words, to fill distance with action, or to fill discomfort with pressure. Instead, we allow understanding to speak for itself, confident that authenticity carries its own power. Philosophically, there is a profound lesson here. Human relationships are not projects to be completed, they are living systems to be nurtured. Just as a garden cannot flourish under constant force, intimacy cannot thrive under coercion or expectation. It requires the careful tending of attention, the steady nourishment of acknowledgement, and the quiet patience to allow growth at its own pace. When we act with empathy, we are tending that relational garden, creating conditions where vulnerability is safe, walls are optional, and connection becomes natural rather than forced. And the beauty of this approach is that it does not benefit only the avoidant. It benefits both parties in profound ways. When we practice genuine empathy, we cultivate emotional intelligence, resilience, and self-awareness within ourselves. We learn to listen not just with our ears, but with our hearts. We discover that relationships are not competitions for control or affirmation, but shared spaces of growth, trust, and mutual understanding. The act of empathizing becomes transformative. It reshapes how we relate to everyone in our lives, not just the avoidant, and it sets a standard for connection that is both deeper and more sustainable. The ultimate insight is simple, yet revolutionary. Empathy is the most profound pathway to intimacy. Words, timing, acknowledgement, and patience are tools, but empathy is the heart. It is what turns understanding into connection, recognition into trust, and presence into love that is quiet yet enduring. It is what allows an avoidant to be seen and to respond in kind, not out of obligation, but out of the trust that has been nurtured over time. So, as we reflect on everything we've discussed, the careful words, the attentive timing, the repeated acknowledgement, the patient building of trust, Let us remember the core principle that binds it all together. To touch an avoidant deeper than love, we must first cultivate empathy, the courage to truly see another human being, the humility to respect their inner world, and the commitment to honor their boundaries. And here is the closing thought I want you to carry with you, connection is not about changing someone's heart. It is about honoring it. It is about meeting them where they are, speaking with understanding, and creating a space where trust and intimacy can grow naturally. When you act with empathy, you are not only reaching them, you are elevating yourself, and in that space, something extraordinary begins to happen. Love is no longer just an emotion, it becomes a lived experience, quiet, profound, and transformative.